The following is rated NSFW. It contains strong language, spoilers, and adult situations, and may not be suitable for small children.
Order, please, order. Reels of Justice is now in session. The newly promoted Dylan D. Fence now presiding. Will you all rise for the Honorable Dylan D. Fence?
Be seated, and thank you to the good voters of Reels of Justice that placed me in this august position.
Well, I didn't vote for you.
51% of the people did, and that's what counts. Today, we are hearing the case of Jackie Brown versus Inglourious Basterds. This format is a bit different, so please pay attention, because even I find the rules confusing. I had to write them down on this card. All right. First rule. This is a head-to-head matchup to see which underappreciated Quentin Tarantino movie is superior. Rule number 2. The case for each movie will be made by Mr. Maynard for Inglourious Basterds and Mrs. Cruz for Jackie Brown. Rule 3. Either party may object to any point raised just as we allow in normal procedures. Rule 4. Based on the arguments, the jury will then decide which film is the better of the two. We are not looking for our usual judgment of if it's good or bad, not guilty or guilty. Once the verdict is rendered, the winner must be placed above the loser in all rankings and considerations.
Ad infinitum.
What was that?
Ad infinitum.
Ad infinitum. This is true. This cannot be appealed. All right. With all that said, Mr. Maynard, you are appearing for Inglourious Basterds. You may begin
Yes,
with
sir.
your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, good peoples of the jury, I believe it would be a fool's errand to try and accuse the 1997 film Jackie Brown of being a bad movie. Luckily, that is not my job here today. Rather, all I have to do is prove that this film is not as good as my client, 2009's Inglourious Basterds. Now, there's no shame in that, because Bastards is far and away an excellent movie, and probably my personal favorite of the Tarantino catalog, maybe only closely rivaled by Reservoir Dogs. But due to my penchant for war films, I, of course, hold a very special place in my heart for Inglourious Basterds. Now, Jackie Brown, on the other hand, is probably my least favorite of Tarantino's works. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's probably his most forgettable. I believe it's overly long, underutilizing its time, and features relatively low stakes, especially compared to that of Bastards, which features superb acting and casting, beautiful compositions in spite of its gruesome content, and possibly the highest stakes imaginable in a war film: the extermination of Adolf Hitler and every other high-ranking officer of the Third Reich. Yes, when compared against the steep measuring stick that is Inglourious Basterds, I believe we will find that Jackie Brown falls short. Thank you for your time.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Maynard. Mrs. Cruz, you are appearing for Jackie Brown. You may begin your statement.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Before I begin, I just want to say that what we're debating here right now is which one of Quentin Tarantino's underrated films is superior. And to that I say Jackie Brown is superior because it's actually about Jackie Brown, whereas Inglourious Basterds is about cinema. Jackie Brown is a carefully crafted homage to classic blaxploitation films that uses a character-driven progression to drive the plot while developing the slowly unfolding story. Again, not long, not low stakes, carefully crafted and slowly unfolding. As a screenwriter, Quentin was beholden to the story, the titular one being written with an actress in mind. He specifically wrote Jackie Brown for 2 years with Pam Grier in mind, which just goes to show that not only is this film much more character-driven, and as a screenwriter, when it came to Jackie Brown, Quentin was beholden to the story, with Jackie Brown being written with an actress in mind. And as a director, he was beholden to cinema itself. Whereas with Inglourious Basterds, it was a film primarily about film itself that glorified the medium of film with the help of a fantastic story. But Jackie Brown is a film primarily about characters navigating intersecting dilemmas that glorified the development of the characters and the story with the help of the medium of film. So while Inglourious Basterds was an incredibly beautifully directed film with incredible cinematography, great dialogue, and a story that clearly took ages to develop, Jackie Brown is anchored in reality. So it's not low stakes. It's a more human story with more human characters that offer a glimpse into a reality that Tarantino himself brought to life.
Thank you, Mrs. Cruz. For Inglourious Basterds, you may now present your case to this court.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to begin first by elaborating on my point of being overly long and underutilizing time. Now, Jackie Brown has a runtime of 154 minutes. Inglourious Basterds is a runtime of 153. As far as time goes, we're looking at two practically identical films in terms of runtime, but the difference to me is what is done with that time. Now, both are slow-paced films, but where Basterds uses that slow pace to create excruciating tension and incredible suspense, Jackie Brown simply prefers to sort of sit and vibe. It's basking in its own soundtrack. Jackie Brown is so overly congratulatory of its style that it forgets to include some substance as well. Now, let's look at the opening scene of Inglourious Basterds, where the farmer La Petite, I think that's correct, is sheltering...
We'll recognize him as the Frenchman.
Sure, the French farmer is sheltering his Jewish neighbors under the floorboards, and this is possibly one of the most tense scenes that Tarantino has ever done. It's probably one of my favorites that he's ever done. Now, this scene opens with some humor, but there's always that underlying tension because you know these are Nazis, and Nazis make people uncomfortable, obviously. And at first, you're kind of unsure why you're following this bureaucratic exchange between an SS officer and a farmer, but then the camera slowly pans down mid-conversation after the purpose of the visit is already revealed. You know that he's hunting for this family. And then the camera pans down and shows you the family hiding under the floorboards. So you, the viewer, are now aware of this, whereas obviously half of the conversation above is not. This brilliantly follows the Hitchcock model of suspense versus surprise, right? And for people who don't know about the rules of suspense versus surprise, Hitchcock said that if two people were sitting at a table having a conversation and then the table exploded because there was a bomb under it, that's surprise. Whereas with suspense, Hitchcock would have shown the bomb 15 minutes earlier and showed you the timer ticking down with 15 minutes left, and that creates suspense. And Tarantino plays with that a few times during the film, like later Omar and Donnie have dynamite on their legs that Tarantino is sure to show you, and he shows you the timer ticking down on it to just show you that ticking bomb that's coming. Same with the dynamite under Goebbels' chair. So you know what's coming, but you don't know when. And so I think that really fills in the empty spaces of Bastards. The long pauses and the drawn-out scenes are constantly filled with tension and suspense because Tarantino is always giving you the information you need prior to the scene or in the beginning of the scene to properly create that tension. Now, let's contrast that with a scene from Jackie Brown, like when Ordell first meets up with Beaumont, played by Chris Tucker. You don't really know what Ordell's motives are with meeting Tucker. You know that Tucker's been arrested and he's bailed him out, and you know that he says he won't like to serve time, but you're not entirely sure of his motives when he comes in. There's certain things to throw you off, right? I mean, he paid for his bail. He says things like that. He says everything's cool. They talk about going to get food afterwards. So he's really trying to do everything he can to throw you off the trail that Beaumont's about to be murdered. And it really isn't until Ordell finally pulls off into the lot, opens the trunk, and shoots Beaumont that you know Beaumont's going to die. And that's a surprise. That's as much a surprise to the audience as it is to Beaumont. So these long silences and empty spaces in Jackie Brown are just that. They're empty. They're not filled with that same tension and suspense that you get in Bastards. You're waiting for what's going to happen next, but you have no inclination really for what it could be. It tries to keep you on the edge of your seat, on the tip of your toes. But I think that you spend so much time sitting there waiting for what's going to happen next. That's what I felt. I was like, okay, can the next thing happen? Where there's numerous scenes in Bastards that are using this kind of brilliant model of suspense versus surprise. You've got the strudel scene where they order strudel, and you know that she knows who Landa is, but you don't know if Landa knows it back, right? And he orders milk, and that sort of like cues you in. Oh man, does he know? You've got the bar in Nadine, right, where you know that it's full of Nazi soldiers, and you know that the allies are going to do their best to get out of there, but when will they get found out? You know that it's likely to happen. So that's what I think is part of the difference. Is there's never really a moment in Bastards where the film just stops and vibes. The only one I can really think of is when Emmanuel is standing by the window and David Bowie's Cat People Putting Out the Fire is playing. With gasoline. That's the only time where the film really just stops and kind of basks in its own soundtrack. Otherwise, the music, half of which is scores done by Ennio Morricone, are all, that are plucked from other films, are always used to build suspense or build drama within it. So I think it's still a film that uses its soundtrack very well. I think both films are. But I think that the way that Bastards uses suspense and tension is vastly superior to the way Jackie Brown uses surprise. And I'll pass it to my colleague for any rebuttal or counterpoint.
Cool. First and foremost, I just want to say that you gave me a lot of things to think about. That was a really interesting way to approach this topic here. But first, the next thing I want to say is in 1998, there was a press conference that the cast of Jackie Brown did, where one of the reporters in the audience asked everybody on stage, what went wrong with Jackie Brown? Why was it so long, and why was it so drawn out? And the first person that spoke up was Forrester, and he said, once upon a time, there was this idea that Tarantino-esque meant something that was like fast-paced, quick cuts, in your face. And what Jackie Brown did was it completely flipped the script and changed the model for what Tarantino-esque even meant. And it changed to a nicely developed, slow-going story. And after that, Samuel L. Jackson said, first and foremost about Jackie Brown is that this is a movie about people primarily who are over age 40, and they're making important decisions about their lives. They're not impulsive. This isn't about speed. This isn't about quickness. This isn't about just jumping to the next scene. This is about a deep dive character analysis in the form of a story told through a filmic medium. So when we're talking about the pace of the film, I think it's really important to think about what the film is actually trying to do in the first place. You have a story about multiple people who are over the hill, who are figuring out what is going on in a really important time in their lives. And the majority of them... Can you hear my screaming toddler?
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay.
She only just started screaming.
Shut your mouth, you wee pup.
It worked.
And
you can pick up from your last thought where you're talking about people being over the hill.
So yeah, it's older people figuring out what they're going to do in these important situations in their lives. So it's not so much that it's going slow and that we're having, what did you say, long, empty spaces. We're having moments that are distinctly and uniquely human, where we're getting to know these characters second by second as they get to know each other and get to know even themselves as they're navigating these different life choices that they have to make together. The next thing I want to bring up...
objection, if I could make one objection.
Can we make objections?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I told you
anytime.
could make objections. It was said that the idea that Tarantino films were, quick and cutty, and that Jackie Brown broke that mold. Pulp Fiction is also 154 minutes, which is, essentially the same runtime as both of these films. And I know that when Tarantino wrote the final script for Bastards, he used Pulp Fiction as a measuring stick for length and everything. So, Pulp Fiction was a long film as well. One that, much like Bastards, was broken up into chapters, and I think moves a bit quicker than Jackie Brown in that regard. So
Okay,
that's just my
I have a
objection
rebuttal
as a
for that.
clarification.
I have
I
an
was gonna say,
objection
so what,
for
what
that.
actually were you objecting to, though, Mr. Maynard?
I was objecting to the point that Jackie Brown somehow set this bar for long drawn out
You're saying that
Tarantino
Pulp
films.
Fiction, which came out beforehand, set the bar, not
Correct.
Jackie Brown. Okay.
Correct.
So to that I say, Tarantino himself said that he didn't find it appropriate to compare Jackie Brown specifically to Pulp Fiction, because in the Tarantino universe, Pulp Fiction is an anomaly, and this is his words, anomaly, and Jackie Brown is an adaptation. He was doing something completely different with the story of Jackie Brown. So with Pulp Fiction, honestly, I'd give the same critique that I give with Inglourious Basterds, where you have movies that are much more, how do I put this? They're movies that are primarily focused on showcasing all of the possibilities of the filmic medium, whereas Jackie Brown, that's not what it's doing. It's not here to be, as you said, overly indulgent. It's what it's actually doing is it's coming more back down to earth. And for another example, this is actually an objection I wanted to make to you. When you brought up the opening scene to Inglourious Basterds, what you have there is literally a direct, explicit homage to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So when we're watching that scene, yes, it is incredibly done. It is paced so well, but it's not done for the sake of the story. It's done for the sake of an homage. Whereas the scene with Beaumont that you brought up in your and what you were saying, this is actually one of the most frustrating things to me. This particular scene, I've read so many critiques of this scene that say that the viewer doesn't even understand what Ordell has up his sleeve. And I have to beg to differ. I have to say I disagree. And that's actually the reason why I disagree, is one of the reasons why I love Jackie Brown so much. What Quentin does is gives such an authentic portrayal of a particular subculture of Black life that, at least when I first watched this movie, I knew exactly what was about to happen. As soon as he went to his apartment, I knew he was about to be killed. It was not a surprise to me. It was not a shock. And I think it's because what Tarantino does, and Jackson and Greer both say these in interviews as well, that what he does is he taps into something that you didn't really see during this time in film. And the only other people that were showing these intimate, authentic portrayals of Black life were usually Black directors who were directing pictures that primarily Black people watch. So then you have Tarantino who comes along and he says, you know what? I'm going to do an homage to Blaxploitation films, but I'm going to make it story and character driven. What he did with Inglourious Basterds, on the other hand, was I'm going to give an homage to film itself. I'm going to create a love letter to the history of cinema. So when I say that Jackie Brown is superior to Inglourious Basterds, it's exactly for that reason. What he gives us with Jackie... Go ahead.
Go on. No, you finish. I don't want to cut you off.
Sure. Just what
Order, please, Mrs. Cruz, please.
One thing, so there was a San Diego Comic-Con panel for The Hateful Eight, and Tarantino himself said that his favorite thing he's ever written was the opening scene to Inglourious Basterds. And I would not disagree with him. It is definitely top 3 for me of one of my favorite Quentin Tarantino written scenes. But this is just another thing that he does where he himself, as a director, is overindulgent. But when it comes to focusing more on giving homages to cinema instead of sorry, I lost what I was saying, but
Well, I would like to object though about the idea that this opening scene exists only as an homage. not only does it
Oh, I didn't say only as
establish
homage. I definitely didn't say
that's what I
only
heard
as
earlier,
homage.
and so I'd like to. I
I
mean,
said it
it's
was
certainly,
first and foremost an homage.
and I disagree. It's not first and foremost an homage. It is an homage, but its first and foremost principal job is to introduce the character of Hans Landa, introduce us to the time and setting that we're in, and establish those stakes of the Jews hiding out from the Nazi hunters, and an inciting action for Shoshana, who
100%.
has her whole family murdered in front of her and runs off. So the film, to me, the scene's doing a heck of a lot of stuff.
So can I say I agree with you? That scene is doing a heck of a lot of stuff. It is doing every single thing that you just said it's doing. But I will say, more than anything else, that scene is an homage. If you watch it side by side with the good and the bad and the ugly, with how it's introduced, who is zoomed in on, what happens next, exactly what the characters do when they go to sit at the table, when they go to take their drink, it is an
I would like to say, though, that whatever that pepper soup is that they're eating in that scene in Good, the Bad, and the Ugly always looked delicious to me.
And Mr. Maynard, I'll remind you that you mentioned that scene and deliberately contrasted it to the Chris Tucker scene in Jackie Brown. So Mrs. Cruz is on fair ground here.
The ground is fair, sir.
When did I say the ground wasn't fair? I was just objecting to the idea that the scene was painted as nothing but an homage. And
No. I never said nothing but. I said it is doing literally every single thing you listed, but the number one thing it is doing is paying an homage.
I don't think it's a number one. I think homage is like number 3, maybe number 4. Tops.
Order. Well, that's going to be a question for the jury to decide. Let's move on. Let's move on to our next point. Actually, Mr. Maynard, I have a question from the bench here. You were saying that Inglourious Basterds is an underappreciated Tarantino movie, yet it won an Oscar and was nominated.
Wait. The underappreciated was never my terms. Though that was put on by the Reels of Justice marketing department, which, as you know, is overworked and overreaching constantly. So I know, because Inglourious Basterds is the third highest rated on Rotten Tomatoes of Tarantino's movie. Jackie Brown is tied for 4th with Django. So neither one is underappreciated.
And
one underappreciated, that's Hateful Eight or something.
Can I actually add in something to that? I don't necessarily think that the awarding of... Okay, just because it won awards doesn't mean that it's appreciated by a general broad audience. I feel like when this, like, I'm agreeing with you here. I feel like when you think Quentin Tarantino, like the random whatever everyday person, they're probably going to say Kill Bill. They're probably going to say Hateful Eight. And I feel like Jackie Brown and Inglourious Basterds are the ones where they would like fall under most of the other ones when people think about Quentin Tarantino. I would say
that's Jackie Brown. This jury member would think of Pulp Fiction would be the first.
Yeah, to me, Jackie Brown is one that has definitely fallen through the cracks, and even Bastards, I think, now lives kind of in the shadow of Django.
Yeah, agree. Oh my god, completely in the shadow of Django. Yeah.
So and no one talks about Death Proof, which we should.
We should.
Wait, can I say something controversial?
Please do.
It's controversial. Like, it's really controversial. Nobody does talk about Death Proof, and this is so controversial. I know that he only wrote the story for True Romance, and he did not direct it, but I think that in a weird way, that is an underrated Tarantino story. Maybe not, it's obviously not a Tarantino film, but that is probably the most underrated Tarantino story out of all of them.
I'd say similar things about Natural Born Killers, which I believe he also wrote.
I agree. Oh my god.
Because it's a very Tarantino style film, although it's Oliver Stone. But
it's
order in this court. Let's get back to the two movies that we're discussing, Inglourious Basterds and Jackie Brown.
Very good. And one final point I would like to mention, Foxy Brown was 94 minutes and Coffee was 91. So, the same. Blaxploitation, not exactly a 2.5 hour movie medium.
Maybe they should have been.
I could have done with more Foxy Brown, I will admit. If she could have cut off more dicks and put them in jars, I'd have been for it. I could watch another hour.
Order, Mr. Maynard, please. Do you have to bring up cutting off dicks in jars every case? Now, I think the jury heard enough about the length of the movie. If there's no more points to be said about that, I'd like to move on to some different arguments.
Sure. I'd like to bring up the point of the really excellent villain characters that are in Inglourious
Ooh,
Basterds.
okay.
Specifically Christoph Waltz. Now this is really his first big film that gains notoriety to American audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it immediately established him as a tour de force in the acting world. I mean, he wins Best Supporting Actor for Hans Landa, and it's
Mm-hmm.
well deserved. I mean, I know we said earlier that awards are not exactly that important, but I think he stepped up to the plate of becoming one of the best actors of our generation simply with that one performance alone.
Objection. I didn't say awards were not important. I just said that they're not necessarily representative of what the general public believes to be, superior.
Fair. That is exactly what you
The
said.
jury will consider awards as they deem fit.
I would like to mention Robert Forster was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Jackie Brown, but he lost it to Robin Williams for Good Will Hunting, which I got to say is also
Ooh.
deserved.
True.
And another nomination from that year was Burt Reynolds for Boogie Nights, so I wouldn't even say Forrester got second place. So now Waltz incredibly captures the dichotomy of Nazis, and this dichotomy is what makes them so terrifying in real life, but also in this film, and that's that they put on this air of courtesy and civility, but what lurks just beneath that surface is this merciless, vicious violence.
Ooh,
And
that's my ex.
what's amazing, I don't think we should laugh at that. What's amazing about Waltz is that he can go from charmingly interacting with Diane Kruger, who plays Bridget von Hammersmark, and being outwardly charming, even gentlemanly. And I would like to mention that it's interesting that he's being charming while he's slipping on her supposed glass slipper that she lost earlier, right? So Prince Charming is returning her shoe to the princess, and then Prince Charming, unlike the fairy tale, suddenly snaps into a horrible monster and strangles her to death with his bare hands. All sense of civility is thrown out of the window. Literally, it turns a corner, it turns on a dime. He goes from civil to sadist just that quick. And we see this dichotomy in a lot of the Nazi characters. Another great one is Daniel Bruhl, who portrays Frederick Zoller. Now, he's the epitome, basically, of gentle and courteous throughout most of this film, as he's courting Emmanuelle Moreau for her, in their entire relationship. You'd almost believe that he's actually a nice guy if he weren't, a fucking Nazi. But then we see his true colors at the very end when he forcefully enters her projection booth. And the fear is palpable. I mean, he's full of rage. He's the embodiment of this rejected, toxic male who immediately turns his anger on the woman for not giving him what he believes he's earned. He even says, "I'm not a man you say go away to. After what I've done for you, you disrespect me at your peril." Rejection to him, of course, is disrespect. So again, we're reminded that beneath the exterior of these refined gentlemen, there lurks the hearts of violent maniacs, dangerous killers, and dare we say even potential rapists, with how that scene could have gone if she didn't bravely shoot him. And you've also got August Diehl, who was Gestapo officer Dieter Hellstrom, and he's the gentleman who's sitting in the small French bar in Nadine, who ends up interrupting the sort of meeting that they're having, and he manages to be confrontational and aggressive while simultaneously friendly and courteous. He doesn't even switch on and off like the other two. He's both at the same time. He smiles and he scares you. And that whole scene is incredibly tense because not only do you know the secret they have to hide their identities. Not only do you know the stakes that are at play, again, incredibly high stakes. If they can't get out of that bar, they can't kill all the Nazis. They can't destroy the Third Reich. Highest stakes imaginable, practically. And you have this incredibly hostile character, Hellstrom, who repeatedly drops the aggression and starts being polite, which gives you this brief air of respite, making you believe, shit, they're going to get out of this, only to have that swept away from you again in a moment's notice as he becomes antagonistic again. So the scene has this ebb and flow of creating tension and pulling it back and creating tension. So it gives you a moment to breathe and then it takes it all away again. So incredible, memorable villains. I mean, to me, to the level of like the Nazis in Indiana Jones, you know, especially in Raiders. That's some vicious ass Nazis that are just in their black coats and but they're gentlemanly, right? They all comb their hair, and yet they're all vicious, murderous maniacs on the other side.
What
Now,
about
to me,
Hitler?
Can I dive in real quick?
please do.
So I just want to bring up a quote from Jackson himself. When
That would be Samuel L. Jackson.
that would be him.
No, it's Andrew Jackson.
It could have been Michael.
Michael. No,
It's Tito.
I love Jack Brown.
when he was asked a question about like what it was like to play the characters that he plays, there's a quote of his that I love so much because he says that when he goes into some of his characters, he embraces the fact that they're not all good, they're not all bad, they're just people who have a human dilemma. And one of the reasons why I think Jackie Brown is superior, going back to what I said earlier, is that it is rooted in the real. And while Inglourious Basterds gives us this incredible revenge fantasy that I completely appreciate, especially as a Black Jewish person, love it, Jackie Brown gives us something else, where it gives us something that is more down to earth, close to home. It gives us that subtle... It gives us the same subtle, charming thing that we get in Inglourious Basterds, but it's different. And it's different because it is essentially human. We get relatable. We get almost familiar characters with Jackie Brown that force viewers to question their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own beliefs about so many different things in this, what you would call an incredibly long runtime, but in a way that's it's almost like a invitation for people to ask themselves what it is that they think and feel about different things. And in a lot of cases, I feel like when people turn to film, like, of course, if they're not just like viewing it to study or analyze, they're turning to it for possibly some type of catharsis. And while Inglourious Basterds is, as we can both agree, an incredibly well-written, beautifully directed story, Jackie Brown really gives us something that we can feel. And in an interview that I was watching with Pam Grier, she says that one thing that she loved so much about playing the character of Jackie Brown was that all the characters in the film develop in a sequence as in theater. With Jackie Brown, it may seem like it's quote-unquote slow-paced and long, but that's really because we're getting as close to in time as, I mean, it's like reminiscent of Reservoir Dogs, where it may feel long and might feel like it's dragging on, but you're really just watching everything play out and unfold along with everybody else. And you brought up something that's also related to another reason I think Jackie Brown is superior, and it's who knows what, why do they know it, does everybody else know that they know it? And it's this idea of who has the knowledge has the power. And in Jackie Brown, I think for the time that it came out and the purpose of the film itself is just more powerful, that it was giving a strong, intelligent, clever, witty, resourceful voice. And honestly, the person that had a monopoly on the knowledge in the film was a Black woman. And as far as representation and even planting a seed for any type of paradigm shift in the minds of viewers that are coming to watch a film, I think Jackie Brown does a bit more than Inglourious Basterds does in that case.
Well, I mean, as an Italian New Yorker who likes to beat Germans to death with a baseball bat, I thought the representation in Inglourious Basterds was great.
Remember I mentioned
Order, you're Polish, Mr. Maynard.
Remember I mentioned time and context. We're talking 1997. Powerful Black woman who's smarter than everybody else in the film as a leading person, as the hero. I don't know.
Well, I think a lot of that is the homage, though, to those older Pam Grier films. I mean, Foxy Brown, she's the smartest person in the movie. And I mean, she is easily the most resourceful. She arranges the whole thing. So I can't say it's entirely unprecedented.
Agreed.
I think it fell to the wayside in certain periods of time, the 90s especially. But I think that and that's probably why, homages were made to the blaxploitation era. But I think that Pam Grier has definitely done those kind of characters before. Granted, in Jackie Brown, she's allowed to keep a lot more clothes on.
And a lot more agency, a lot more power, a lot more control of all of the scenes, knows things that other people don't know, and has a monopoly on knowledge.
Mrs. Cruz, would you say she's less stylized in Jackie Brown than she would be in the previous blaxploitation movie she starred in?
I'd say she's more authentic and human and representative of an identity that needed to be showcased and amplified during the time.
All right, that's where the court thought you were heading in that direction. Mr. Maynard seemed to be a bit confused.
No, I mean, I see your points on authentic in some ways.
And timely.
Oh, I agree on the timely and the representation. I can't argue on those things, but I'm thinking more about like Ordell as an authentic character, and it's when I saw it, I saw his character as a bit more just kind of muddled.
In what way do you not find him authentic?
Well, he's a if he is, to me, he's a generic criminal type. I mean, by the end of the film, what do we know about Ordell? I mean, we know that he sells guns. He likes money.
Wait. We don't just know that he sells guns. We know that he has been in the game for decades.
No, he says he's been in the game, but if he's...
Pause.
Order. Mr. Maynard, please conclude your point on Mr. Ordell, the character, and then Mrs. Cruz, you'll be able to respond.
Okay, thank you.
But if he's been in the game, like you said, how does he only have $500,000? It's not a lot of money. It's a small amount of money. He's a small-time player. I mean, I almost have a hard time, talking about authentic, I have a hard time believing that the ATF would even really be after this guy, except to try to get to the bigger cheese. This Ordell is a stepping stone, and to waste time investigating a dude who's bringing in $500,000, it seems useless, and that's why I think the killing of Ordell in the end is so problematic, because you wouldn't kill your evidence, you wouldn't kill your lead. They needed Ordell alive to get the actual big gun runner.
Rewind.
Ordell is small time.
Objection.
Small time.
Okay, Mr. Maynard, are you satisfied with your points?
I'm ready for the objection.
Okay, very good.
My objection.
Cruz, you may proceed.
This is another comment about timeliness. I don't want to get into too much details, but somebody that is very close in my life, a black man who was sent to prison for 15 years for possession of the smallest amount of crack that you could even possibly imagine. This goes back to the whole timely thing. Ordell isn't just some generic criminal. The whole plot of the story revolves around the fact that he is sick of this. He wants to make money. His gangster hustler ethics have not been working. He hasn't been profiting. His business hasn't been booming. He says, I'm ready to get out of the game. I'm sick of this. I'm done. I need $1 million. I'm retiring. That's where we meet. That is where our story begins. And that is why Jackie Brown is all the more important, because we have this archetype of this classic, remember, late 90s, early 90s, whatever, 90s gangster guy who's really trying to, get out of the game. And this is a really important identity for this time. And to have this woman come in, this black woman who seemingly doesn't know anything, deals with misogyny throughout the entire story, is a sex symbol, kind of honestly underrated herself, and completely ruins this guy's plans for what he was going to do. Like, not only does it give us this powerful hero of this woman, but it's in a way a really interesting critique on just what was going on in the United States period in the 90s in the black community. And that's really interesting. And the fact that the actors themselves say that it is authentic. And that, so in an interview that I watched earlier today, actually, Jackson was talking about, he was responding to a question from somebody at one of a Comic-Con panel where they were like, Spike Lee is constantly critiquing the fact that Tarantino constantly includes the N-word in his movies, and in this movie it's just like that. And he's just like, No.
38 times in Jackie Brown.
Yeah, he says characters should be allowed to speak in the language that these characters speak. Or Del Robbie would absolutely say the things that he says in the way that he said them because that is who this character is. He said that he studied for so long and read the novel multiple times just so that he could get this character's history, because he said that he wanted to make sure that when audiences came to view Jackie Brown, they knew that before Jackie Brown, the story happened, Ordell had a past, and when they left the movie, Ordell had this entire network of stories and experiences and memories that the audience could cling to. And so he's not just a generic criminal.
Oh, no, I think Jackson's performance is excellent, and I think he brings a lot of life to a character that was probably much flatter on paper.
Interesting.
Technically, everything's flat on paper.
Thank you.
It's funny that you say that. I was watching an interview with Tarantino, and he was talking about how he started writing Inglourious Basterds, the script, in 1998. But he said the story just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, that I got to the point where he was like, oh my God, I don't think I could do this story justice. I might as well just sell my script. I can't find actors for this. I can't do this. And he was about to scrap the film. He was like, you know what? I can't do this. I might as well sell it to somebody else. And he talked to, oh my God, Bender? Yeah, he talked to Bender, and he was like, look, I'm going to scrap this film. Like, if we don't find particularly an actor to play your dude, the person that Waltz ended up playing, he was like, we're going to scrap the movie. And he was talking about how he would literally sacrifice the entire movie if he couldn't find somebody to bring the character from the script to the screen. And then he found it in Landa. And what's interesting is, in Waltz. And what's interesting about that is that whatever movie we're talking about with Tarantino, he cares so deeply and so just passionately about every single aspect of these stories that when we take a moment to step back and go, okay, what is this film actually doing? What is the purpose of this film? Like, what was he doing here? When I think about Jackie Brown versus Inglourious Basterds, I think, okay, with Jackie Brown, he's sending us a message here. But the message he's sending with Jackie Brown is one that's incredibly critical of society itself. He's giving us a story about what is going on in the world, spinning it on its head, and giving us a critical analysis of it. He's making commentary about the world. He's honestly doing philosophy in the form of cinema. With Inglourious Basterds, we get something completely different. We are obviously getting the same critical analysis, but it's not the thing that's front and center. With Inglourious Basterds, what is front and cinema is first and foremost, as I said before, a love and passion and adoration and appreciation for cinema. That is why, more than anything else, you can count on more than two hands how many direct homages we have in Inglourious Basterds, how many callbacks to past films, how many genre-specific cinematographical moments we have that are not just telling us a story, they're drawing back to something else that happened in filmic history. With Jackie Brown, we're getting story, we're getting character, we're getting plot development, and that is what it is. But for the sake of, in a way, trying to change the world or something like that. And that probably sounds
But I don't see these
really
things
hyperbolic.
as lacking. I don't see these things as lacking in Bastards.
Oh, it's not lacking. It's just not as good.
No, I think it's better. I mean, if you want to talk about philosophy, right? I mean, we're talking about...
Are we really going to go here right now? Are we going to go into...
Order.
If we're going to talk about how the character of Hans Landa ends up versus how, or Del Robbie is, and I still stand by my point. I think the ATF would bother to investigate him, but not to shoot him.
They would.
Not to shoot him.
What do they do to
They
Southampton?
need him to find where he's getting the guns from. He is nothing but a pawn to them. They need him to find where the guns are coming from. They need him to actually take down someone significant. That's what they need him for. They wouldn't shoot him to save Jackie Brown.
They don't care. They use black people as target
and they wouldn't care about Jackie Brown.
I don't buy this argument. I really don't buy this argument. I think you're giving way too much credit to what the police department, the FBI, the CIA, whatever they were doing.
Michael Keaton?
They did not.
Michael Keaton
Who was
in
great,
the
by the
ATF.
way. Who was great,
Michael
by the
Keaton
way.
in the ATF would be excellent. Now, if you want, I mean, we've talked about how there's tons of commentary within the Nazis, not only on commentary on Nazis, but on how it applies to, you know, modern toxic masculinity in the terms of Brule and several of the guys, where the civility of courtliness and gentlemanliness just sort of belies a violence, a potential violence, always just beneath the surface. That is, to me, just as relevant social commentary in this film that doesn't take a backseat to the homages at all. I think are prevalent. And, you know, as far as timeliness of Jackie Brown in 1997, well, Bastards is right now in 2020 is even more timely than it was in 2009. Like, we're living in it right now, again, right here. You can see it on the news, on the internet, wherever you want to go. All of that is living and breathing around us right now. And
What about
Tarantino
Jackie
talks
Brown,
about it
though?
frequently times. I mean, we could go on to that, but let me make one last point too. I think it's very telling that Landa is the one who's allowed to live at the end, right? Because I think it was discussed earlier by some that they wish there was one more Nazi killed, but you can't kill Landa, the last Nazi, because they didn't kill all the Nazis. The Nazis came to the U.S. and they infiltrated the government in every single level. And that's what's so important to learn from that history, is that fascism escaped Germany and it came here. And it's important to know that that's where it went.
What is your objection, Mrs.
My
Cruz?
objection is that Nazi ideology was literally born in the United States, not the other way around. They literally derived all of their ideology from American anti-Black racism, from chattel slavery to the Jim Crow era, took it, brought it to Germany, and used that to literally provide the groundwork for the Holocaust.
But that doesn't mean that those Nazis then didn't come back here and receive shelter.
Oh, they absolutely did.
And to me, that was the point of Landa living at the end of the film. But no, I agree with you on those two.
To be fair, though, Landa would have had the swastika in his forehead, though. So I don't think it's a fair thing to say that he was going to come back and be fully integrated into American society.
He could have wore a baseball cap, dude. No
he
big
could
deal.
have absolutely hidden himself. For sure.
He'd had no
and
problem.
Knowing that he came back to the United States, that is literally a white supremacist state, he honestly could have probably gone really far here. You know what? He probably could have even become president.
Yeah, if it was not for the swastika on his head, he probably could have done more.
I'm pretty sure might not have stopped people from still voting for him.
Yeah, it might have been,
All right,
been a plus.
Let's get a little more refocused on the movies.
Small thing too, well, it's not that small, but I think the casting in Bastards is really wonderful in that,
perfect.
You know, a lot of those actors are not well known, especially not here in the States. You know, they're largely German-born TV and film actors. You know, and I could only imagine trying to cast somebody who speaks a language that you don't would be so much more difficult. You know, Melanie Laurent and Denis Ménachot, they're French. And I think one of the few actors who's really not like the nationality that they're portraying is Mike Myers. I mean, who's Canadian,
Ryan
but
from The Office.
Well, you know, he's American, isn't he?
That's what I'm saying. Ryan from The Office. You're right. Let me stop.
But Mike Myers, Canadian, playing the Brit. Otherwise, everyone's basically playing something reasonable. I think Fassbender is Irish and German, so he's not exactly British. I like this film, and I like the film that can have Mike Myers in it, right? It does not mind dropping for a moment to have a whole scene of comedy after you've seen something horrible the previous scene.
Yes.
Because Tarantino knows his audience, and his audience knows him, and so we're comfortable with laughing along with the bad guy when it's fine, like laughing along with Landa in one moment, and then being horrified at him choking someone the next.
He's so good at that, isn't he?
Yes, exactly, and that's what I think he's really brilliant at in this film, is that he can just snap and switch between those two seamlessly. And also, here's a fun note. Is a bingo is fun. And of course, this is important to know that before Inglourious Basterds, most Americans were not aware of strange distant lands, which are apparently called countries. and that in these countries there are people who look remarkably a lot like themselves, but speak strange tongues, which are apparently called languages. So Inglourious Basterds is really one of the first films ever to utilize these other countries and their languages and bring these amazing revelations to the big screen for American audiences.
Oh my God, he kind of did that with Jackie Brown too, where he made people realize that black women actually can be smart.
Yeah, but that doesn't help my case.
Okay, order here. It sounds like we're drifting into some silly territory here with this idea.
That was not silly.
That wasn't silly. That was legitimate. I agree. No, that was
introducing countries in cinema. Is there any...
was well aware that there were other countries, for the record.
I was going to say. All right, so I think we can move on to our closing arguments, unless there's any.
No. I want to talk about low stakes.
Okay.
All right.
Carry
on, Mr. Maynard.
I want to talk about.
As my father would say, you are on thin ice.
I want to talk about
some food cart rolled in or something.
You'll be fine.
You'll be providing sandwiches during
we are talking about 2 movies simultaneously. If you didn't expect it to be a little bit longer than normal,
it's going to go bad.
Well, we expected it to be long, but let's try to stay on better track than diving into silliness of introducing countries to movies.
I will absolutely not avoid diving into silliness, and how dare you?
I will keep banging my gavel at you, sir.
Close to being disbarred. Now, the stakes could not be higher in Bastards. I mean, the complete annihilation of the Third Reich in one covert operation is got to be some of the highest stakes in film history. And of course, the film even goes so far to rewrite history to give you a satisfying conclusion, unlike real history, which was not that satisfying. And the stakes, there's constant stakes in this movie. In every single scene, there are some sort of stakes at play. Besides just the obvious extermination of the Third Reich, which is half the film, you've got Jews hiding from Nazis beneath floorboards. And that's the stakes the film starts with, and they're enormous. I mean, they can't make a peep, and you instantly identify and feel tension with them, even though you don't know who the characters are. History books have taught us enough that we can kind of experience that horror, and we understand. And of course, the Jew who survives, Shoshana, she continues to hide throughout the movie, but she no longer has floorboards to hide under. She has to hide in plain sight for the rest of the movie. She is just as exposed as she is under those floorboards, but she's got to hide in the guise as a French girl. And the whole time, just like we're waiting for them to discover her under the floorboards, we're waiting for the Nazis to discover her identity and her true nationality or her true identity. And from Zoller being beneath the ladder at her theater, from the SS picking her up in the car, to taking her to lunch with Goebbels and her lunch with Goebbels, or that insanely tense scene with Landa where they eat the strudel. And they have the milk, and you're wondering the whole time, does Landa know? Does Landa not know? She knows. There's just these constant stakes the entire time of when you're waiting for when she's going to get found out. So that's why I wanted to kind of tie that back into that scene in the beginning, that is sort of a microcosm of the film on a whole. Those Jews hiding under the floorboard essentially is representative of the way she has to hide throughout the entire film, except she has to hide in plain sight. And so it's just as terrifying for the remainder of the film. Now, to me, the contrast in Jackie Brown, I talked a little bit about why I think it's kind of low stakes. It's only $500,000. It's not even that much money in 1997. I don't even really, I didn't care if Ordell got caught or didn't, because I think your point about him being authentic is true, that he's not even that bad a guy. I mean, what does he do that's really bad? I mean, he kills Chris Tucker, but who here wouldn't kill Chris Tucker if they had the choice? I mean, I think most of us would.
You mean Chris Tucker's character, right?
Yes, of course. But I mean, I was rooting for Ordell to kill him. He's annoying, like, kill him. Plus, as is established, it was self-defense that Ordell killed him in, right? It's a clear-cut case of him or me, and you best believe it ain't going to be me. And that exact same thing applies to Jackie Brown, right? She has to be killed because she's suddenly a threat to his very existence. So to me, Ordell is not a bad guy because he's never maliciously, he's never unnecessarily malicious. I mean, the worst thing he ever does is really tease Melanie, and she deserves it. He has ample opportunity to kill Jackie Brown. I mean, there's that one scene where she has a gun on him, but he has the rest of the movie to wipe her out, and he just doesn't. And he could, and it would be the same thing as with Beaumont, where it would be, oh, our witness is dead, we have no case, and they'd have to give it up. I mean, she walks right into Melanie's condo with Lewis there. It's a perfect time to kill her and dump her body in the ocean. The ocean is right there, and boom, they've got no case, and Ordell is safe again. He never chooses to do that. And to me, that's why I see Ordell as, that's why I said he was kind of muddled, where he's not evil, right? I mean, like the villains in Inglourious Basterds are evil, almost comically so, right? I mean, they're almost caricatures of evil, whereas Ordell is just a guy trying to survive and get by. And so I don't care if Jackie gets the money. I mean, I don't want to see her go off with that half-melted bail bondsman. He looks like a half-melted candle. I don't really want to see that happen.
My father was a half-melted bail bondsman. How dare you, sir?
And we salute him for his service. Please continue, Mr. Maynard.
Say again, Jesse.
Oh no, I was just like, how could you come at him like that?
Oh yeah, no, screw him. And to me, overall, Jackie's plan is not a good one.
Oh my god!
Like it hinges on things that are out of her control and even out of her ability to predict. Like, what would have happened if Lewis didn't kill Melanie? How would that have changed Jackie's plan? Now, if Lewis didn't kill Melanie, then Ordell wouldn't have killed Lewis. And now you've got three people to roll over on Jackie and tell the feds about the money she stole.
Your objection, Mrs. Cruz?
Speculation to the nth
It's not speculation. She can't control that murder. It's out of her control.
What?
It
literally
been part of her plan.
Happen. So the fact that you're bringing it up is completely irrelevant because it's not applicable to the situation because it doesn't happen. So she's able to actually carry out her plan.
Yeah, I'm going to have to sustain that objection, Mr. Maynard. You don't know what would have happened based on these events not transpiring.
But what was Jackie's plan? Clearly, her
don't
plan
underestimate
hinged on
Jackie
these things
Brown.
she could not expect.
Don't underestimate Jackie Brown.
And I guess if I do have one small point before I pass it over to my colleague, do the Delphonics not have any other song besides Didn't I? I mean, it seems like Max Cherry's got the cassette, and that's the only song. That's the only song on the cassette. And it's like, it makes even less sense because it's a cassette. Like, if it was a CD, he could at least play the track back or put it on repeat. But if it's a cassette, he's either rewinding constantly to get back to the song, or he's driving around long enough for the song to play again, and that's the only time we happen to see him.
Haven't you ever had a cassette that only had one song on it that you literally had to do that for? Because I definitely have many memories.
In 1997? I don't think so. No way. Cassettes were a little more advanced.
Maybe not in your community, but definitely in my Black community, that was absolutely a constant thing.
This court does recognize that singles are indeed a thing.
So was that a singles? I thought he got a greatest hits.
I do.
We would have to verify that.
Yes,
but whatever
I like
it
that
is,
verified.
Singles exist.
Jingles.
But it's 1997. Let's get a CD player. Come on.
Unless you can't afford
Wu-Tang
a CD and don't have a car with a CD player in it.
Wu-Tang had a double LP by that time.
Okay, not everybody has access to the places that they can go to get a CD player, nor do they have a CD player in their car. His car literally went beep, beep, beep. This dude had an old car.
Max Cherry? I mean, Max Cherry is a bail bondsman. He seems like he's doing all right.
Well, maybe he's super steeped in Black culture and the Black community, and he just hasn't upgraded.
Did that seem to be true to you? I don't know if it didn't seem to be true to me. But I'll pass it to you for any points that you would like to make, either in rebuttal or just to introduce new evidence.
All right, so the main thing I want to comment on, but I do want to go back and say you're definitely right about the Max Cherry stuff, and I misspoke when I said the stuff about Max Cherry. There's a chance that he could have probably afforded a car that had a CD player, but there's also a chance that he probably only had access to a store that only had singles of that Delphonics song. I just wanted to clear that up before I went on because it was going to bother me. I want to talk about this idea of low stakes. So, the idea that Jackie Brown was a low-stakes movie is honestly, in a way, offensive. Jackie Brown is rooted in reality. It's driven by realism. It's actually talking about actual history and real lived experiences that happen. And it's not going to have the same type of villains that Inglourious Basterds is going to have because it's not a revenge fantasy. It is a movie, as I said, rooted in reality. So when we have these stakes, it's not going to be as fantastical and cinematic necessarily, if you know what I mean. It's going to be a bit more subtle. We have a black woman in the 90s who is dealing with job insecurity, poverty, the threat of constant police violence, misogyny from somebody who is technically her employer. And she's trying to navigate all of these things. And the reason why Ordell isn't this intense villain is because, as you said, I quote, he is just a guy trying to survive and get by. We're not going to have these extreme caricatures of people. We're going to have people that are navigating different situations. And what's interesting about Jackie Brown is that you said that Ordell chooses to not kill Jackie, and he has all these opportunities to kill Jackie. And yeah, he does have all these opportunities to kill Jackie. And the reason he doesn't kill Jackie is because he's not as smart as Jackie. What we have in Jackie Brown
Agreed.
is this woman who is more clever than anybody gives her credit for, got caught up in some situations that were honestly wrong place, wrong time. She was handed a really fucking shitty deck of cards. Wait, can I curse?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've been
Yeah.
saying the F word quite a bit.
Okay.
Fuck yeah.
Wait, have I said a curse word
Where's my
before?
damn
Okay. You have this, basic average black woman who's navigating these really high stakes situations for somebody in her situation. You talked about how in Inglourious Basterds we had all these characters who were hiding in plain sight. With Jackie Brown, we have the same thing, but she's not hiding under floorboards. She's literally living and existing as a black woman in the 90s trying to cope with the threat of constant police violence.
Well, objection on that. I mean, Emmanuel Mimo is a Jewish girl living in occupied France, surrounded by Nazis. I mean, so it's to me they're similar.
They're
both
absolutely
in oppressed
similar.
situations.
They're absolutely similar. But I'm going to go back to my original point. Jackie Brown is rooted in reality. It is not a fantasy revenge story. So the stakes, in my opinion, are a bit higher because it is rooted and driven by realism and actual lived experiences that are not based in as much fantasy. And as I said earlier,
I'd like to challenge this fantasy bit momentarily.
You mean you'd like to object?
I'd like to object. The main theme played in the credits, opening and closing of this film is across 110th Street.
Oh, okay.
Across 110th Street. But the film takes place in Los Angeles. Now that's unrealistic.
That's
Right
actually
there.
not unrealistic. That's just drawing a comparison between different...
There's no 110th Street in Los Angeles.
But there are
Googled
definitely simultaneous experiences of Black lives going through the exact same things, just in different geological areas. So while
certainly, but LA needs to get its own swans.
No. Just because there's no 110th Street where Jackie Brown was living does not mean that it is not 100% applicable and realistic. Why do you think even to this day West Coast rappers' words are completely applicable to life of people that live on the East Coast? Because they have shared stories, shared experiences, shared histories. The reason he chose that song very specifically, not because 110th Street, but because the actual story, the lyrics, the narrative being told in the song is directly applicable to what Jackie Brown is going through. And to be honest, it even proves my point even more. You're literally being rooted in reality here. You're getting the story of overcoming and just breaking free from a situation that you honestly shouldn't be able to break free from. But she was able to outwit, outsmart, outstrategize police and this guy who's supposed to be this, fucking career criminal. And she says, you know what? No, this isn't what's going to happen. What's going to happen right now is that I'm going to get my reparations and I'm going to get it to this guy who's technically been exploiting me. Fuck the police. I'm going to do everything I can to make them realize that they're actually fucking stupid. And I'm going to outsmart everybody. I'm going to get mines. And that's it. And she does it. And not only is that relatable, it's just more relatable than anything that happened in Inglourious Basterds because it's rooted in reality. And as I said earlier, I am a Black Jewish person. When I watch Inglourious Basterds, I love it. It's beautiful. It is absolutely one of my top 3 Tarantino films. But when it comes to... actually, I like it more than I like Jackie Brown. Hands down. But as far as which one is superior, I would say it's Jackie Brown. And that's just because if we're talking about stakes, if we're talking about the way the story is told, if we're talking about the way the characters are developed, Jackie Brown takes the cake. And as I said earlier, it's because we have a film that is, it's telling a story. You're getting the story of the characters. You're getting the story of Jackie Brown. You're getting the story of Ordell. You're getting the story of everybody. Even you're getting the story of homie who just got out of prison. Like, you're getting these really intense stories, these character developments. And yes, you're getting the same thing in Inglourious Basterds, but you are not getting it to the same degree at the same level. And I'll say it again, Inglourious Basterds is more about film itself and showcasing what the medium of film can do. It's not primarily there to tell you a story. It is primarily there to pay an homage to film as a medium. Whereas Jackie Brown is literally there to tell this story, send a message, and kind of give a fuck you to the status quo film industry with respect to erasing certain narratives. It gave us something authentic. It gave us something real. And for the time that it came out, it centered a Black woman who was smarter than everybody else in the room. And I think that makes it superior.
All right. That was some good argumentation from both sides. Mr. Maynard, are you ready to present your closing argument?
I believe I can make a closing argument, yes. I would like to remind the court that no Nazis were killed in Jackie Brown, and I think that in itself is disappointing.
So noted for the record.
Your Honor, hopefully I've made myself and my points very clear to you today. It's not that I think Jackie Brown is a bad movie. I just don't necessarily think it's an excellent movie either. And that's what it would need to be to outdo my client here today. It would need to be an excellent film, and sadly it is not. I was reminded upon reviewing the films in question for today's trial why Jackie Brown is my least revisited entry in the Tarantino catalog. It's long, it's slow, and hell, there's really not a lot of stuff happening. Funky, yes, it's certainly funky, but it rarely takes the opportunity to put the fun back in funky, and that's what I think is missing. It very much feels like Tarantino is telling somebody else's story, and the truth of the matter is, he was. In comparison, upon what is most likely my dozenth viewing of Inglourious Basterds since seeing it in theaters, I asked myself, Christ, why don't I watch this movie more often? It's hilarious, it's tense and suspenseful, it's got great action, and it seamlessly transitions between these tones as fluidly as Hans Landa switches from civility to sadist. And what's amazing to me is these films only share a 2% difference in score on Rotten Tomatoes, which leads me to believe that either Jackie Brown is largely overrated, Inglourious Basterds is criminally underrated, or some combination of the two. But, of course, Tarantino knew his accomplishment when he made Inglourious Basterds. That's why it ends with Brad Pitt looking directly into the camera and saying, I think this just might be my masterpiece. And on that very masturbatory point, I would have to agree with Mr. Tarantino. Inglourious Basterds most likely is his masterpiece, a film where substance doesn't take the backseat to style. And that's why I hope you, of the jury, see fit to render this verdict in favor of my client. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. Mrs. Cruz, you may proceed with your closing argument.
I would like to thank you as well. And I do want to, piggyback off of what you were saying. Inglourious Basterds is a incredibly written, beautifully directed movie with, the cinematography is beautiful. Tarantino and the actors, every single person on the set of Inglourious Basterds did an incredible job of showcasing exactly what is so powerful about the medium of film itself. But when we're talking about superiority, I think there are a few more things that are important than just style, and a few more things that are important than just fun. When we think about Jackie Brown, it is necessarily going to be differently received than Inglourious Basterds is. It came out, a decade before Inglourious Basterds? So, I mean, knowing Tarantino, it wasn't... Jackie Brown might not be his masterpiece. It was just one of his earlier films. But, to that same degree, when Tarantino made Jackie Brown, he wanted to tell a story during a very specific time that was incredibly real, incredibly authentic, and he wanted to showcase experiences and lives that weren't showcased in the way that he did it during that time. And while Inglourious Basterds was brilliant and in its right, one that I personally would probably choose to watch over Jackie Brown more, the reasons why I'd go into it would be a bit different. And this goes back to why I feel Jackie Brown is superior. With Jackie Brown, we have, it's a piece of cinematic history. It is a cinematic artifact that represents something bigger than just another film that's trying to show off what's so great about film. It's doing something else. It's showing us what is so great about storytelling. It's showing us what is so great about character development. It's showing us what is so great about amplifying historically silenced voices. And it's centering narratives that aren't often in the mainstream and aren't often on the big screen, particularly when we think about the time that it came out. It's a rare gem for the time that gave something to audiences that they weren't able to find anywhere else. And not only did Tarantino himself think that, Pam thought that, Sam thought that, and Black audiences around the world felt the same way. So while Inglourious Basterds was an incredible film, an excellent film, possibly his masterpiece, it is not superior because Jackie Brown gave us storytelling and carefully crafted meditative storytelling that highlighted experiences that just weren't being shared in the time that it came out. And so, as great as Inglourious Basterds is, it just doesn't hold a candle to Jackie Brown when it comes to telling an incredible story and giving us characters that are characters for the sake of being characters and not for the sake of trying to give an homage to something else. It is authentically itself, and that's what it is. It is Jackie Brown. It is not a conglomeration of other stories. It is Jackie Brown. And while, yes, it is an adaptation of Rum Punch, it's still uniquely his own.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Cruz. And thank you again, Mr. Maynard. Now, members of the jury, Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Haslar, Mr. Schlender, you have all heard the testimony and the other facts of regard to this case. Bailiff, please escort them to the deliberation room where you will render your verdict.
This way, you filthy yaps. All right. Well, these counselors have given us a lot to think about.
There were two movies, Ben. 2 movies.
Get out of here, Mr. Prosecutor.
I ran out of pages for my notes. There were some very compelling arguments. I like how they really attacked it from different sides. You know, trying to use what one was saying as a weakness as a strength and so forth. You know, like especially with the issue of like timing and characters and style versus substance and things like that. I thought they had a very good back and forth.
Yeah, and that's what makes this one so hard. It's like they're both very good, but they're very good in different ways. So like to compare like, ooh, the authenticity versus like the showmanship, it's like, well, both make a great film. It's hard to like compare the two like equally in your head. But Mr. Schlender, go ahead and proceed with your thoughts.
Oh boy. Okay, so like we were saying, lot to unpack there. I really did think I really liked the character arguments that Miss Cruz was making. Like, this idea that these are lived-in characters, and the reason the movie is long and stretched out and slow and methodical is very deliberate. That these are more these are older people. These aren't action heroes. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of living their life, going through the motions, and it's one of those things where like this could be anyone, and this happens to be the most interesting event that's happened in their life, right? And then the way she was tying it into it's a bit more of a commentary. I thought that carried a lot more weight, and definitely pulled me closer to Jackie Brown than when I had probably had originally been thinking about it, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
And then with Mr. Maynard's arguments about Inglourious Basterds, I mean, it is a slick film. I mean, I usually don't describe movies that are like 2.5 hours as slick, but it's pretty good. It's pretty crisp. I think he made some good arguments, especially leaning very heavily on this, what I would say is the superior acting in Inglourious Basterds. I would definitely give Inglourious Basterds the point on the acting front, even though I did really like the way the actors characterized things in Jackie Brown. But I don't think you could compete with Brad Pitt and Christoph Waltz. They just are pretty amazing. I mean, maybe Eli Roth's Bear Jew kind of drags it down a bit. I mean, he's only 6 foot. He's just not that big. I'm sorry. So,
Right.
I'm very much am on the fence, but I think Mr. Rodriguez might be able to tip me in one direction or the other. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, I think I'm the only one here who actually has Jackie Brown as their favorite Tarantino movie. So,
Vaudier has failed
Going
us.
in, it was your
and
favorite.
yes, going in. And I just got to say, before I get into my points, that I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't talk about genre that much, because Jackie Brown was described as a blaxploitation movie by Mr. Maynard, which it is not. It is a
I believe
character
he said it was
drama.
an homage, to be fair.
Okay, well, let me say this. Quentin Tarantino himself, in an interview that is on the Blu-ray of Jackie Brown, said that it is not a blaxploitation movie. It is influenced by blaxploitation, but it is not blaxploitation. So, okay, that said, I think my main conclusion when it comes to which one is superior in terms of these arguments comes down to character. Because easily, Max Cherry is my favorite character in any Tarantino movie, and Robert
I
Forster
really
is my
liked him
favorite
too, and like
performance.
seemed like both these lawyers were talking
He
down
is
about him.
he is transcendent in that Tarantino uses him because specifically his career had been down for 20 years. So you're supposed to look at him and think, well, that guy, I mean, we don't even need to count him as part of the equation. And then he completely
Not to
knocks it
interrupt,
out
Ryan,
of the
but
park.
you mean the actor's career had been down
Yes,
for
the
20
actor's
years, or
career,
the characters?
precisely.
Oh, okay.
Robert
Okay, gotcha.
Forster had languished in genre cinema for at least 20 years. I mean, if you've seen one of the most recent seasons of Mystery Science Theater, he's in Avalanche, which is awful.
Oh my
He's
God.
in Alligator, which is all right. He's in Vigilante, which is
Oh,
But those
my
are like
God.
the high points of a low career. And the fact that
Okay.
Tarantino would take this time after Pulp Fiction, which is arguably the biggest kind of scene in independent film in the 1990s, and instead of zagging, he zigs. And he says, I'm going to give these actors who not only have had shit work for 20 years, but people don't even consider them to be actors anymore, and I'm going to make my entire film about them. And the fact that he did something that was that ballsy and that such a middle finger to what he was expected to do, I think that that completely overshadows the fact that Inglourious Basterds is exactly what you expect him to do. It is a Tarantino movie to the fullest. It is what it's what when you walk into a Tarantino movie, you go, well, it's probably going to be something like Inglourious Basterds. With Jackie Brown is the exact opposite of every single inclination he should possibly have, and the fact that he sticks the landing is fucking remarkable. It is a
I would agree
masterpiece.
with that. I mean, it helps that it was like he didn't write it himself, so that probably gives it that little bit of a edge that makes it stick out a little bit more.
But he injects those characters with so much of his personality and how much and his lived-in experience
So
that
much.
he practically did write those characters.
Yeah, Ordell definitely felt like a Tarantino character to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I definitely gotta say, if
definitely
you
somebody
told
he
me-
hung out with in the 80s.
And
If you
Jackie
told
was
me that,
absolutely a Tarantino character too. I mean, I'm thinking about the original screenplay for Reservoir Dogs. The way he writes women characters is literally how he wrote Jackie Brown.
Yes. Totally agreed.
Hey, if she's allowed in the deliberation room, I just want to say John Travolta's fucking career was over before Pulp Fiction 2. So, like, he already did that once.
But that's one career.
Hey, there
He's
you
doing
two
it
are!
for
Get out of
two.
here, you lazy dogs! Get out of here!
Oh, good. Ooh, the teriyaki donuts.
Ooh,
Ooh.
I've always wanted to try one of these.
All right, so Brian, I think you make a good point too, because honestly, if you told me that Tarantino was making a World War II movie, I probably would imagine basically what Inglourious Basterds was. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like that's a good point. I think Jackie Brown has a bit more, comes a little more out of left field. But to be fair, he only had done Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction before that, so like that could still have been him finding himself. And then as his films go on, he clearly tacked in the other direction.
Well, to speak to that he only had 2 movies. Now, I was watching all the Blu-rays of all of his movies all week, and Siskel and Ebert had a special after Pulp Fiction hit 100 million, so around late 1994, about the Tarantino generation. This is after he's only made 2 movies, and they literally called it the Tarantino generation with 6 years left in the decade. So, even though there's only 2 films, they had, not both of them, but Pulp Fiction had such a seismic impact and was imitated and ripped off almost instantly.
Right.
That it was almost as if he made 10 films in 4 years.
I remember that's why people didn't like Jackie Brown as much, because they were expecting another Pulp Fiction. And
Precisely.
It was not that.
And I think that's why it resonates for me, because it was the first time that I thought, oh, he can actually be sensitive and he can actually depict human beings that are not just quote machines. Like, he can tell a nuanced story about people that I believe exist instead of these pop culture spouting hitmen that I don't believe have ever existed and definitely don't exist in the way that they're rendered now. But
Inglourious Basterds has those sort of characters too, but it also has the blown up characters sort of to teeter totter.
I think we could say Inglourious Basterds is incredibly stylized.
Yeah.
I don't.
Jackie Brown
No,
is
but it's
ground
not like
level.
Mimo, she's a very real character to me, in comparison to someone like Brad Pitt's character, who's something of a caricature,
I think
He's a
ultimately
cartoon
it's the difference
character.
between
Let's
a
be
film
honest, my goodness.
and a movie.
Mm.
Inglourious Basterds is a movie.
Mm-hmm.
It is entirely about movies and what movies mean to Tarantino and what movies have meant to culture and essentially that. Jackie Brown is a film about people processing things and dealing with each other and handling things. And
But
that's
is
the most
that
mature thing you
inherently-
could possibly do.
I was gonna say though, does that make it inherently superior? Then is that the quality you're looking at? That
No,
is
I'm
that
just
the
using
metric
that
for
as
superiority?
part
I
of the
think-
basis of why I think it's better. I don't
I
think
think
that's the entire
Tarantino
thing.
kind of knows that the Academy likes to nominate and award movies that sort of celebrate cinema. I think he also did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for that same reason,
Yes.
because he wants that award so bad. So that's where it gets sort of, it
I
takes
like
a
Once
mark
Upon a
off in my head for it, but it doesn't make it bad. I mean, I do like cinema, so I do like films that celebrate cinema. It's occasionally I found it distracting in Inglourious Basterds, oh, they're doing that thing. But other than that, I once I realized it, I kind of liked it.
I think it's difficult because he hasn't made a bad film. He's made an okay film with The Hateful Eight, and he's made a film that in his version is overlong and not so great in Death Proof, but in the Grindhouse cut, it's amazing. But to put all that into this one conversation, that's what makes it especially hard, is that neither of these films are bad in honestly any way that I can quantify.
No, yeah, it was right down the middle to me coming in, and I was kind of hoping I'd be swayed one way or the other. And I don't know, I still kept feeling like I'm pulled. It's like I said, they're good, but they're good in different ways.
Yeah,
I gotta say, because the very first time I saw Inglourious Basterds, I didn't care for it very much. But like most Tarantino movies, it gets better the more you watch it. And I noticed the same thing with Jackie Brown. Though the first time I watched Jackie Brown, I liked it a bit more. But the first time I saw Jackie Brown, was like wasn't in the theater. I mean, I think if you had to see any one of these movies in the theater, you might walk away with maybe a lesser opinion on it because that's a long time.
Yeah, Jackie Brown. I had the first movie I ever saw in the theater of his was Kill Bill, and then I've seen every single one in the theater since then. But Jackie Brown was one that I had to discover on DVD.
Yeah,
I think on the same score there. So what do you guys think about the length? Because I think that was like something they both harped on. For me, Jackie Brown, that's like the one thing that's like really against it. Because like some of these opening scenes, before I really know what the plot is, he just sort of like lingers in this sort of thing. Whereas while he does linger in the opening scene in Inglourious Basterds, like there's a point to it. He's a Jew hunter. Like that tension thing that the prosecutor brought up is very, very prevalent here. Whereas in Jackie Brown, it's like almost around the 50-minute mark that I start to kind of get a clue of where things are headed.
Yeah, but I don't think we can put too much weight on the tension thing, because Tarantino described Jackie Brown as a quote-unquote hangout movie. And so I don't think there's the tension is supposed to be there. But then there's the question though, like, but who are we hanging out with? I mean, why do we have to hang out? I mean, maybe we should be demanding a little more on the entertainment side of the ledger.
I think it's simmering.
But I do think it was a very deliberate choice, but it is a very strong demarcation point for both movies, like the tension versus the lack of tension. So, yeah. Maybe we should consider it, but it's very, very deliberate. I don't think a deficit of tension is a negative or a surplus is a benefit.
And they're different kinds of tension. One is an adventure movie tension. The other one is human tension.
I do agree with that.
The pot is on the stove, and before it boils, it has to simmer. And for about an hour and a half, Jackie Brown is the personification of a simmer. And either that's something that is in your vocabulary and you're okay with that, or it's something that takes some time to accept, or maybe even something that you outright object to. But for me, that's something that I appreciate, I think, maybe most about it. That I get to spend this time with these characters.
It's a slow burn.
Ryan, it sounded like you're coming down pretty resolutely on the Jackie
he had
Brown
his mind
side.
made up when he stepped into his room.
Well, I was ready to hear the other side, but having heard the other side, and especially having heard the side that I was already kind of on, I am resolute in my decision.
All right. What are you thinking, Ben? You said you were pretty much on the fence as well.
I'm pretty torn because I do like both of them. I do like Jackie Brown for like sort of. It's not like the only film that exposes like poor black life to me, but it's one that's like sort of more front and center, and one that does it in a very thoughtful and humane way. And I don't see that too often. Where I have seen films like Inglourious Basterds. On the other hand, I think I can watch Inglourious Basterds a lot more than I can watch Jackie Brown, at least like on repetition. I think it has a bit more of that sort of, iconography that cinema should have. So I think I'm going to lean towards Inglourious Basterds, but it's just a hair. I mean, I feel like whichever one I lean towards, I'd hate myself for it because the other one is just so good. Which makes it such a hard decision, but I think I'm going to lean towards Inglourious.
All right. Well, I got to say, the strength of the argument and the context with which they were presented, I am actually going to change what I initially thought I was going to vote for, and I'm going to pull for Jackie Brown in this one as well.
Nice.
All right. We're resolute in our voting here.
I am locked in. Ben, you locked in?
It doesn't matter.
Ryan's already thrown away the key, so that's.
And he swallowed it and ate it.
I've already torn up my ballot.
Yeah.
All right.
Stomping on it right now.
I think our prosecutor or our defense has been listening through the wall, so she already knows. But let's go out and deliver our verdict.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of Inglourious Basterds versus Jackie Brown, we rule in favor of Jackie Brown being the better of the two Tarantino films.
Unbelievable. That's unbelievable.
Very well. In accordance with this ruling, any power ranking, listicles, or any metric of Tarantino movies, Jackie Brown must be included in a higher position than Inglourious Basterds.
Oh, that reminds me, I have to get my listicles checked next week.
No, yeah, you know what? We'll just call it there. Thank you for your time, everyone. Court is adjourned.
Mrs. Cruz, would you like to share your thoughts on today's verdict?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised for the verdict, to be honest. But I'm, after hearing the reasons why you all went, well, two and a half of you went with that choice. That's like where I was getting with it, where it's just, there's just something much more, God, I hate that the word that came to mind was like, it's warmer, but neither of them are warm, but there's just something more familiar and more human and more, I don't want to say more cathartic, but it's just what he does with film is just so different with each one. That's why, like, earlier I asked, can we change, instead of saying better, because I don't want to say one of them is better than the other, because they're both excellent. There are just different things about each one that make it mean different things to different people, I guess. But if we're just talking about generally, yeah, it just seems like, for many different reasons, Jackie Brown is superior, even though they are both, 9 out of 10.
Thank you, well put. And here comes Mr. Maynard. Mr. Maynard, how did you feel about this jury's verdict?
Oh, it's you, huh? Oh. Well, I mean, we knew it was going to be a close call. That's why we put these two films against each other. While I can't say that I agree, I will respect the court's decision. For me, I'm still an individual who will always take fantasy and fiction over reality. It's why I watch film, is to escape reality. So I don't really appreciate depictions of reality in my film. Add a Frankenstein or a Godzilla in Jackie Brown, we could talk. It'd be a better movie. But I respect the court's decision. But I'm sure I'll still be watching Inglourious Basterds a hell of a lot more than Jackie Brown.
Thank you very much. That's all the time we have for today. Let's toss it over to our post-trial analysis back in the studio.
Hey, all right.
Damn you, Ryan! Damn you, Ryan!
Okay. I was going to say, Jesse, very well argued. I got to say, I was leaning towards Bastards, but the way you put in context the character arguments and how it was like the slow being deliberate, and I was like, yeah, you know what? The more I'm thinking back on it, yeah, I'm digging it. I do got to say, though, Inglourious Basterds had the better acting, though. I mean, definitely a point in its favor there. And Rob, you made some very, very good arguments.
Samuel Jackson knocked it out as Ardell. Come on.
Oh, that's true. I mean, yeah, but I mean, we're talking like everyone in Bastards again.
Yeah.
Well, except for the Bastards themselves. Like they're most.
Yeah, the Bastards themselves were kind of the weak part, but except for Brad Pitt. I love Brad Pitt.
Can I give y'all a weird backstory?
I wonder why.
Yes.
Please.
So I first heard about Quentin Tarantino, period, because when I was younger, I lived with my grandparents who owned a video store, and I was the rewind girl in the video store, and I stumbled across a book that was just like an interview book with Quentin Tarantino, and it talked about like how he worked in a video store too, and then it just talked about what went into making Jackie Brown. And just like as a little kid, it wasn't, and I was way, way, way too young to be watching Jackie Brown. But I remember watching it and just being like, oh my gosh, people can do this with stories. This is possible to be done. And so I feel like for a lot of the thing that draws me personally to Jackie Brown was just like seeing this like strong, intelligent Black woman hero in a story. But then when I really thought about it more and like all the other things, the stylistic choices and stuff, it was really like, wow, it's just, I don't know, there's just something really, really intense about it. And it is also fantasy. Like we have to say, like, yeah, Inglourious Basterds was more fantasy, but like Jackie Brown is also fantasy. It's literally an adaptation of a book, so it's like but there's just something more. There's just something superior about it. But it's
So was Jackie Brown your first Tarantino movie?
It was my second Tarantino movie.
Oh, okay.
When you watched it like playing forwards, you were like, "Oh, this is even better."
10 points to Ben.
The book that you read, was it only interviews with him? Or
It was just him. Yeah.
I think
it
it's
was just
Tarantino on Tarantino is the book, I believe.
Was it Orange?
That
I think
sounds
it
like
was
a book
Orange.
you'd be part of.
Yes,
so the first,
that's the one.
It's that one. Yeah, the first Tarantino movie I ever saw was Reservoir Dogs, and to this day, it is my number one favorite film of all time, like by anybody.
What's my favorite Tarantino movie for me?
I mean, that was what's interesting about this episode is that we're dealing with two really good movies by a director that we all
That's
really
why it's
like.
Right. And we should talk about this. This is our first episode doing a head-to-head, and and I think a head-to-head of two even movies opens up a lot of discussion to talk about the pros of each and the cons of each, which is what we do. They'll be a bit longer, as Ben will complain, but we have two movies.
I was just riffing.
We're digging as deep as we do into any one movie that we usually do, but we're doing two at once.
And might I add,
which allows us to.
They're both long movies.
Yes,
with like 5 hours worth of footage here.
yeah, absolutely. They are long movies. Although it's, I should just say though, it's a running gag that I like. I like monster movies and movies that have monsters, and so like when a movie's just got humans, I tune out. I'm like, really, just humans? Like I see humans every day. Can we put some aliens or something? So to me, Nazis are a form of monster.
Only Jackie Brown has cops.
To an actual monster.
Systemic racism is pretty much a monster.
Yeah, there you go. You're just not thinking about it in the right way.
I mean, but when you give it Michael Keaton's face, though, it's hard.
I know, so true.
Shouldn't be so likable.
So Jesse, what do you have going on? Anything you want to plug, or anything you just want to talk about that you've got going on recently?
I'm publishing a book of poetry this week.
That's very important.
Awesome.
Where can we?
Like 3 weeks ago. So
it would probably by the time this airs. But where can we get this book?
So I'm actually like self-publishing it, and it's really just like it's pay what you wish. You can either get it for free, or it's really just like Venmo me what you want, and then I'll send it to you. And I'm actually releasing it via PDF, and I'm doing an audio version as well. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a website? I mean, do you have a website that people would be able to pay where they wish there?
I should make one because so far I've honestly only
put it,
100%. Yeah, I've only put it on Instagram because I'm just yeah. So I can.
What's your Instagram?
That works. How do we get you on Instagram?
Oh, so my Instagram is @moontwerk, which is my version of Sundance. People ask what moontwerk means, and that's what it means. It's Sundance, but moontwerk.
I get it. I see what you did.
That's exactly what I assumed.
Yeah, of course. So if we go and follow you, Moontwerk, on Instagram, then we should be able to Venmo you money and get this book of poetry, which is super cool.
There's a little there's a post down, like if you scroll down a little, it's like a brown and green post, and the book is called Salvage, but the L is in parentheses.
Is there a theme to the poetry, or what's it all about?
Yeah, so all of the poems are about environmental injustice and structural violence from a Black feminist ecological perspective.
And that's why the L is in quotes.
That is why the L is in quotes.
Ah, very good.
All right, fantastic.
Dylan's head is not just a hat rack, my friends.
Everyone should definitely check out Jesse's book of poetry that is coming up. And Jesse, do you have a recommendation of a film you've seen recently or think that people should check out?
I do. Can I be horrible and can I say two? Just because I couldn't decide between which one.
Yes,
absolutely.
We'll edit one out. Don't worry.
Pole Ryan is what we call it.
The two are on my top 5 favorite films list, and one of them is the 1997 version of Funny Games and the 1972 version of Solaris.
Nice. Oh, okay, nice. I've been meaning to sit down and watch Solaris, so
That's
Watch
not the George
the
Clooney
night-
one, right? That's the
Yes.
one before it.
No,
yeah,
no.
watch the
No, it's
1972
the good
one. And speaking of long meditative scenes, for some reason, one of my favorite scenes in that movie is the one on the highway, and you'll know what I mean when you watch it.
All right, the one long
Awesome.
highway one.
Ashamedly,
And
I haven't
Dylan,
seen it. I should.
You should. Now, Dylan, as our judge this week, you also get to recommend a film.
And continuing my proud tradition of being a judge, I'm going to recommend a movie that actually is about the law.
Ooh.
Reversal of Fortune, 1990, starring Jeremy Irons in an Academy Award-winning performance, also featuring Glenn Close, and the late, great Ron Silver playing none other than Alan Dershowitz, based on the real-life trial of Klaus von Bülow. It is a tremendous film that everyone should watch.
All right, great. I know Ryan added that one to his list. Is that right,
Yeah.
Ryan?
I did.
You know it's a good day when I can throw a movie to Ryan that he hasn't seen yet, so he's going to love it.
And
No, he's a
On his shelf,
difficult
he just
man to
doesn't
please.
know it.
a
He
point
didn't
to
check
that,
recently.
I have the Criterion Blu-ray of Solaris, but I haven't watched it yet, but I will put that right up top.
Yes. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And it's
Ryan,
super
what-
slow.
Ryan, what percentage of movies that you say you'd own would you say you've seen so far?
4%.
Oh my
Conservatively.
Oh, and I know it's true, too. That's why it's so funny, because I've seen those pictures. All right. Well, Jesi, thank you so much for joining us and for beating me, which I hate losing. But I'm glad I lost to you, and we will check out your book of poetry, and hopefully you'll come back on the show and argue and let me win next time.
Oh my god. No, thank you so much for having me, for real. This was like remarkably fun, and I for real would love to do this again. This was so fun.
Totally. We would love to have you back. And from everyone here, thank you for listening to The Reels of Justice, and we will see you next time.
Later.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And if you'd like to share your thoughts on this week's trial or the verdict, please email us at reelsofjusticepodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter @reelsofjustice and on Instagram, reelsofjustice. Also, check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/reelsofjustice.